going to go over a little bit more on transmissions, and we're going to talk about shift plate covers. So I have a couple that I want to show, two different kinds. So this first particular shift plate cover is going to be basically a single bar shift plate cover. So you'll see the standard, you got your 3 forks. Actually, there, I think it is missing, no, it's got all, I think it's missing a fork. No. Okay, it's got your 3 forks, basically, and you have the single bar. So you have a single bar that'll run the length, and each of these forks are pretty much held back by the key. This key runs inside a groove along the edge of the bar. In order to get it out on the other side here, what you would do is you basically remove the snap ring that is just inside. That'll allow you to pull out this locking washer. You would undo this pin from behind, pulling that back. Now the trick to getting it is that this rod will slide all the way out. Once you get all these forks aligned in a particular way, you should be able to slide it out. It doesn't always work quite right. You might have to jiggle it a little bit, but you'll slide it right out. That'll allow you to take it apart. And you have to make special note on certain things. Here, if you look at the key sits right at the edge, so it's butt up against this, and on the other side, just inside here, the key is sitting right up against. So when you go to put it back together, put the key in place, have everything put in place, you'll slide it back, and you'll just have to fiddle with it a little bit, moving the forks back and forth, and you'll slide it right in. It is a very tricky piece to work on, and it is a big pain in the butt. Took quite a while to figure out how to take it apart and put it back together. Seems simple enough when you think about it, but the action of it is a pain. So here you have your single bar shifting. And next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you basically a standard X pattern shifting. So here we're dealing with the X pattern shifting. So here you're going to have 3 bars. Here again, 3 forks. But you see this extra bar is actually mounted to a saddle with a pivot point. So it's saddling this bar that goes across at a pivot point. So when you shift this bar, you're actually shifting this fork. So this fork is pretty much sitting at a point where when you push this, when you go to shift this bar will shift, and it'll cause this fork to move. But this fork is free floating. It'll only move once this is pushed. Then that'll engage this fork. The other fork is actually tied into the shifter for the other gears. And then the middle fork also bolted down. Now on this particular one, you have to watch out, and when you pull it off, you have to inspect. You see the little hole inside the nut here? That would allow basically a wire to go through and then lock onto there, so you don't lose any of the parts. So when you're inspecting, you have to inspect, make sure those wires are on. I think in this case, once it goes through, there's nothing for it to mount onto, so you'd have to string the wire across or around the shifter, and then make sure that that wire's not gonna cause any problems or hang up on anything. But here's basically your X bar housing for your shift plate. All right. Now, when that shift plate is taken and it goes on top, right here, you can see the mounting for it. Those forks will come in, and they will drop into each one of these. So these are the gears basically that it uses to shift. So when all gears are sitting center, it's in neutral. So that way there's nothing being driven. But in order to put it into a gear, you would move it into place. So this would slide in and go into the teeth on the inside, allowing the shaft to drive these gears. So when you have the input shaft here, this is coming in from the engine. Here you have splines. If you're checking the input shaft, you want to check the splines, make sure that they're all good, that there's nothing worn, chipped, or anything like that. You'll have two part of the splines that go all the way back. This is where the clutch brake is going to slide onto. So if you have a two-piece clutch brake, very easy to put on. You just make sure that those two tabs fit right into each side here. But you want to check your splines, make sure that all that's good. That comes in and that'll drive this gear right in here, which then drives these counter shafts that link to these gears. These gears are on the main shaft, and it'll spin the main shaft, which then goes out to your drive. So in order for it to activate the main, because these will spin, but they're not attached to the main until the gear gets locked in. Once the gear is locked in, that spinning will allow to be transferred into the drive, and it'll spin the drive and come out and go into your drive line. So it looks very complex with the series of gears that you have in here. But once it goes together, it fits right well. You have to make sure everything is timed. You have to make sure that you have your input gears timed to the other two gears. And make sure that it all fits, because if you don't have it timed, it's not going to spin. It'll actually lock up. And that timing is basically a tooth is going to run down the whole length and match up with one tooth on every gear, and it'll all be aligned. That's the alignment point. You mark that point and you make sure that you do 180 degrees. You count the number of teeth on either side to make sure you hit that other tooth that's 180 degrees from the other side, and mark that. And then you have the two gears. You want to mark the two teeth that it goes in between. And when you're putting it together, you want to hold those points together, because if it goes off even by one tooth, it won't allow it to turn. It'll be locked up. It's the same problem we had on that transmission over there that was apart for quite a while, and we were putting it back together. We were holding the alignment, what we thought was the alignment, and it was one tooth off, and it wouldn't allow it to spin. But after taking it apart twice and putting it back together, we finally got it so everything was spinning. We even got the auxiliary box mounted up. That was last week on Friday. We got that done, and now they're working at getting the shift plate cover to put on, and you have to make sure the forks will slide in and everything will work within the transmission. So some of the other things that you're looking at when you're looking in the transmission, problems that might be caused, the teeth grinding on the gears when you're trying to shift. So you have to look for worn teeth on the gears. You want to check all the teeth pretty much as you're going through it, because even these teeth will begin to wear. They'll start chipping and wearing away from the heat if it's not getting proper lubrication. Some of these transmissions come with a halo. It's basically a small pump. Will pump the oil up into a halo system that'll sit over, and it will pretty much like a drip system or a mister system in your backyard. It will drip the oil over the gears, keeping them lubricated. And the pump is driven by the gears. So there is an example on this transmission. There's basically, in this part of the housing down here, small pump that's driven right off the main shaft. So if the main shaft begins to turn, that drives the pump, lubricates the gears. Alright, well, this will conclude our short little stint, and hope you had a good time hanging out with me at the shop. We'll talk to you again when we enter into brakes, where we'll deal with disc brakes and drum brakes, deal with hydraulic lines and air lines. So until then, stay dirty.